Behind these masks are teenage drug traffickers.
He's shot at policemen and he's left them bleeding on the streets.
These gangsters control a parallel state, the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. The Brazilian police only enter these slums heavily armed. 3,000 people die on the streets here every year. Thousands more are caught in the crossfire.
Tamara is only 9 years old.
We're hoping to survive in a favela for 3 weeks. The locals call this slum the Gaza Strip, and we're taking up residence.
We've been told that this place is extremely dangerous.
Every wall testifies to regular gunfights. 10 people die on Rio's streets every day.
We've rented a house here and I'm about to find out what it's like.
There are 65,000 people living here, crammed into less than 1 square kilometer.
And these are my neighbors.
My home for the next few weeks is a flimsy self-build, cheap concrete and corrugated iron.
Just wondering if the walls are thick enough. That's going to be our view. It's not a bad view if there's any trouble.
The Gaza Strip's real name is Manguinhos, a collection of shanty towns and slums known as favelas, which shelter the poor of Brazil's second biggest city, Rio de Janeiro. There are over 800 neighborhoods like this in Rio, and Manguinhos is ranked amongst the worst.
Brianna's going to walk us around. He's the owner of our house here in the neighborhood.
Baiano told me the favela was run by armed drugs gangs. We were being allowed to stay because we had their permission, but we'd be watched closely by their tattooed foot soldiers.
So what do you have here?
Comando Vermelho, Manguinho.
So Carlos is tattooed on his arm here in Japanese, CV, which is Comando Vermelho, the gang that's here. It means Red Command. Why would you do something like that?
Brasil, Brasil. Dinheiro, money.
What do you do when you catch someone from another gang? Cut them up. And then burn them.
As my tour continued, Baiano told me it wasn't just the bullets of rival gangs that had riddled the houses. He told me the police shoot at anyone who runs. We run, they shoot.
How do you feel about living in an area where there are so many bullets flying around? She says, what can she do about it? You know, she's got bullets in her shop and in her home.
Suddenly, we spotted armed police moving into the favela just a few meters from our home. Residents told us there'd been a shootout between the police and local drug traffickers.
The bullets were coming in from this way. There were apparently also bullets coming down that way.
The kids said one of the traffickers had been shot.
So the children here are showing me these little drops of blood. It looks like they dragged him.
We followed the trail of blood.
We've just come up to a police defensive position. You can see the police are all on edge right here.
The policeman was holding a live hand grenade in my face. The pin was halfway out.
He's telling me that there are 2 men down. He suspects that the 2 men down are with hand grenades. They're not dead, but they can't leave this position because they're not feeling safe about leaving at the moment. Got an injured man here. They've got the people in that car right there.
Dois elementos marginais feridos sendo socorrido ao Hospital Salgado Filho.
He told me they'd shot 2 traffickers. Both of them were injured. They'd been taken to hospital.
E 2 granadas.
They found grenades and weapons and cocaine on them.
As the police left the scene, the head of the local residents association took us to a nearby house. The traffickers, he insisted, were not the police's only victims.
How old are you? 9. She's just come back from the hospital. She's got a bullet fragment in her shoulder.
Tamara's aunt was keen to tell us that it was the police, rather than the traffickers, who were the enemy in this favela.
She's telling me that she's certain it was the police that fired into this house. The drug traffickers were downstairs firing at the police, and the police were returning fire from this direction.
We'd been in the Gaza Strip for just a few hours, and it was already becoming clear. The Brazilian state, or at least the Rio police, were not welcome here.
Everyone's starting to scatter and move indoors because the Cavarão is coming.
Cavarão means big skull in Portuguese. An armored truck with portholes small enough to hide the policemen inside, but big enough for 8 automatic rifles.
Stop. Move in the house. Move in the house.
Residents told us few camera crews had ever filmed a Cavarão this close. The policemen hidden inside were clearly interested in our camera. The police say the Cavarão is the only way to maintain security in the favelas. Human rights groups have accused Rio's police of using the anonymity of the Cavarão to fire indiscriminately at civilians. That night, the sound of gunfire, sporadic during the day, became more intense.
It's 4:30 in the morning, and we're hearing all this gunfire going around our neighborhood here.
We made our way into what we hoped was the safest part of the house.
I mean, this kind of scares me a little bit because I know the walls are not very thick.
It's 9 o'clock, our first full morning in the favela after a sleepless night.
Raja, I saw that you started the morning here with a little beer, huh?
Yeah.
And everyone's either just stoned or having a beer first thing in the morning. These people haven't slept all night. You see everybody here just rolling their marijuana, and right there all around us, the little kids just watching.
The government says less than 2% of Brazil's citizens use drugs regularly. But I scarcely saw a man over the age of 15 who wasn't smoking grass first thing in the morning. Brazil, meanwhile, is the world's second largest consumer of cocaine, after the US. 2 of my neighbors, Giovanni, a former robber, and his girlfriend Juliana, told me there was always money for drugs, even if few people here had jobs.
He's telling me there's so many drugs in the neighborhoods that a lot of men are abandoning their families and leaving their pregnant girlfriends behind.
He told me that he used to have a life of stealing, but now he has changed after his girlfriend got pregnant.
And he's saying that what he does is he goes through the garbage and tries to pick out stuff that he could sell for recycling and make a little money that way.
She told me it was very hard to take him away from crime.
Are you scared he might leave you for drugs?
If cheap drugs were destroying families in the favela, and drug traffickers were a focus of violence there, I was curious what the police were doing about it. We traveled out of the favela into downtown Rio to meet Marina Magesi, head of the city's drug squad.
How are you?
She told me that she was so underfunded that she didn't even have a computer in her office. She shares one with someone next door.
The furniture here is all brought from her own home.
Marina showed me the rest of her department. She'd recently been cut back to 78 officers to deal with a population of 6 million. And her center of operations is a single poorly equipped office.
And you're combating cocaine in Rio de Janeiro with this? That's crazy.
Back in the favela, mid-afternoon. Unlike the drug squad, the drug traffickers appeared to have no shortage of resources to put onto the streets.
I'm flying this kite, but right behind me, you could see the drug dealers. It's like an auction back there.
I knew that if I wanted to find out how life in the Gaza Strip was really policed, I would have to speak to the drug lords. That night, I met them to negotiate an interview. They refused to let us film, but told us to sit tight and wait for an invitation. Next morning, an invitation to a funeral. Maicon Ferreira was one of the alleged traffickers injured in the shootout we'd witnessed. His girlfriend told me that somewhere between the favela and the hospital, he had died.
She's telling me that witnesses in the community saw that he was shot in the chest, but by the time that he showed up in the hospital, he had another bullet to the head. And she's certain, she says, that the police executed her boyfriend.
The police deny Maicon Ferreira was executed. Either way, he was the victim of what was starting to appear to us to be a civil war between the poor and the police that's claimed 500,000 lives in Brazil in the past 20 years.
We've heard 2 police officers were killed by drug traffickers early this morning. And I want to see what the mood's like.
The funeral of Ricardo Lopez and Samir de Souza Costa had attracted nearly 200 mourners and a massive show of force.
This has been the 2nd funeral this week, and the policemen are telling us that's normal.
We had witnessed 2 funerals in quick succession. There were depressing similarities, mothers and sisters mourning similar young men from Rio's slums who had simply chosen opposing routes out of poverty. But there were stark differences. Where the traffickers were determinedly absent, the police were equally determined to mount a public display of military solidarity. We were still waiting for the drugs lords to grant us an interview. But the police were much keener to explain why the battle for control of the favelas had become so entrenched. Detective Luis Ferreira is a celebrity in Rio, famous for gunning down a notorious drug boss. When we arrived, he was interrogating a gang member accused of murdering a young woman.
Oh my God. He's showing me the pictures that they took of the woman. They put tires over her body and set her on fire. Do you feel that the laws of Brazil allow you to effectively combat drug trafficking in your country?
No.
He told me that the drug traffickers in Brazil were not afraid of prison. They get to keep their mobile phones, they get to meet their wives and have their conjugal rights.
He's telling me that human rights are for human beings, but what he has to deal with are animals.
That evening, another invitation. The drugs lords, the men Luis Ferreira called animals, were holding court just a few hundred meters from our home, if we could cross the street to meet them.
This policeman just told me that if a drug trafficker comes across this roadblock, he might start shooting, and he suggested that we leave.
We made our way through the back streets, hoping for an interview. What we got was a party. All our neighbors had taken to the streets to celebrate Mother's Day. There appeared to be no expense spared in a neighborhood where the average household income is about £100 a month.
I can't help but notice that most of these songs are all about shooting and guns, and all the children are making signs of that.
The kids' obsession with guns was hardly surprising. Just behind me was a local drugs lord surrounded by guards with machine guns. He threatened to shoot if we tried to interview him. It became clear we'd been invited just to film the party. After all, the drugs lord had paid for it in a Robin Hood-like gesture to win hearts and minds. The next day, driving out of our favela into downtown Rio, we encountered another police operation. The anti-kidnap unit was combing through a patch of woodland.
We are looking for a body.
A body?
Yeah. There was a woman, and we have information that drug dealers right here kill her and put her body around here.
They had found pieces of human bone cut up with a saw.
And that's all you have?
Yeah.
It seemed the drug lords we saw entertaining the poor the previous night were simultaneously capable of grotesque brutality, giving with one hand, taking back with another, and getting away with it.
E mutilam para poder colocar pedaço em cada lugar.
He's telling me that it's difficult to investigate murders because drug traffickers often mutilate and cut up their victims and throw them in different parts of the city.
I wondered if it was as simple as that, whether people just disappeared in Rio, victims of spiraling violence, or whether there was a more fundamental problem in the relationship between the favelas and the authorities. I came across Denise, who turned up at one of Rio's human rights centers. She claimed her son had been kidnapped by the police and handed to a rival drug gang.
Cortava o nariz do meu filho. E logo em seguida ele mandava meu filho botar os dedos em cima de uma mesa e cortava.
She's telling me that the rival gang then brought a man they called the Butcher who cut off her son's nose, forced him to put his fingers on the table, cut his fingers off, and then killed her son.
The police deny this, but Denise has been looking for her son's body for 6 months. I went along on one of her regular attempts to get some information from Rio's central morgue.
The assistant to the director's office here is telling her that they can't help her, that she has to go back to a police station. And she doesn't know which police station, and he's telling her, well, go to the police station that's investigating the death of your son. And we're not sure if anyone is actually investigating the death of her son.
Nearly 40,000 people have disappeared in Rio in the last 10 years, most of them from the favelas. If Denise's experience was anything to go by, the authorities were barely interested.
And I can't help feel sorry for Denise because all she's walking out with today is a little pamphlet about domestic violence.
We returned to our home in the favela with a growing feeling that nobody cared what happened to the people there, with the possible and lethal exception of the homicidal drugs lords. But our host Baiano insisted that while the residents received little help from the state, they were still keen to help themselves. He took us to a dance class he runs for local kids. He told me the purpose of the classes was to try to get the kids off the streets, away from the shooting and away from the drug traffickers. Like soccer for Brazilian boys, a career as a dancer could mean an escape from poverty for these young girls. Baiano can only hope.
Quando você me pergunta, acaba me emocionando. Porque eu já perdi muita gente por não ter muita estrutura para ajudar.
A lot of these kids, he says, he loses them to drugs and to violence. And then he just feels that everything he does is in vain.
Across town to another educational program for young residents of the favelas, this time run by the state. It's called a school. In reality, it's a juvenile prison. There are 70 kids here, all of them teenage gangsters.
Is there anybody here who can tell me whether they're a member of any gang? You are Comando Vermelho, Red Command.
I was surprised that gang membership, a cause of so much of Rio's violence, was tolerated by the prison authorities.
Isso é uma coisa que naturalmente acontece, tá?
He told me that when they receive a new prisoner, they make them sign a form which identifies which particular gang they belong to.
O trabalho nosso, como todo, é de que a gente consiga colocar esses garotos todos juntos.
This is a unique unit where they're able to kind of put different gangs together, and they've created some form of harmony.
Our tour continued.
Is there any danger of them fighting with one another?
Yes. It can happen sometimes, so yes.
Well, that's interesting because that's not the story that we're being told by the guy who's giving us the official tour.
Rio's prison system may be trying to eradicate gang violence, but what we'd seen and heard suggested it was only succeeding in reinforcing gang rivalries. The evidence we'd gathered suggested that casual violence in the favelas was met by official violence. That gang culture was connived at, that poor people were being ignored. I wanted to know if the mayor, Cesar Maia, even accepted the favelas, where over 1 million people live, as part of his city.
Agora, o tráfico de drogas produz controle sobre a segurança.
He told me that the state should have a monopoly over public security, but that the drug traffickers have some control in certain slums.
What in fact I'm hearing here is that the mayor is indeed acknowledging that there is a parallel state.
Desses grupos dentro das comunidades se ocultam ali e têm que ser eliminados, presos ou mortos.
It is his opinion that the traffickers need to be eliminated, either in prison or killed.
As night fell, we returned to the favela, still hoping for an interview with the drugs lords, the rulers, apparently, of what the mayor suggested were Rio's parallel states. There was bad news waiting for us.
A contact told us that one of the drug traffickers had a stone-faced look, a look that scared her. And that scared us. We've decided to leave our neighborhood, leave our home, and leave all our things there. We didn't have time to pack, and we're moving to a hotel which we think will be safer for us.
It seemed we had outstayed our welcome. Perhaps our cameras had seen too much. Perhaps we'd seen all our neighborhood drugs lords wanted us to see. To understand the people who really ran the favelas, we were forced to look elsewhere. We got a call from a rival gang. Come along to another favela and don't film until we say so.
It's around 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I think this is the safest time in broad daylight to be with them because they're not all high on cocaine.
The gang took us deep into their favela, eager to show us their stocks of cocaine and their guns.
I'm trying to tie my shoelace here. My leg's shaking. You want me to calm down? All right. Have you ever used this to kill a policeman or kill anyone?
He told me that he shoots at policemen all the time. He shot into their windscreens and left them bleeding.
If they die, he says that's not his problem.
This gang member told me everybody's their customer. Upper class, middle class, even the police.
The only people who are not allowed to come in here and buy cocaine are the people who are armed. They come in here armed, his job is to kill them.
They told me their guns were supplied by senior drugs bosses, who also paid them monthly salaries. Drugs, they claimed, were financing their favelas in the absence of the official government.
A gente faz o que pode. O que tem pra gente, pra mim, tem para todo mundo.
He tells me that they are a parallel state. They have their own laws. If a man rapes, they kill him. All the money that they make from trafficking is actually filtered back into the community.
As we left the favela for the last time, one of the gang invited us back in 10 years to see if he was still alive. What I'd learned about Rio's favelas, parallel states entrenched in poverty, run by violence, apparently ignored by their own city, all this suggested there was little hope he would be around to see me.
Over on More 4 right now, go behind today's headlines with Sarah Smith on the More 4 News. Here on Channel 4 next, it's Friends.